Hi everyone, it's Chala from PS I Love You. Thank you for stopping by today. Today's cards are part of Scrap and Stamp's March blog hop called This Pun's For You, so I encourage you to follow along in the links that will be provided below and on the linked blog. So we're going to start with these cute little cards, and it's all about puns, sarcasm, and funny sayings, and I will be using Lawn Fawn's Best Pun Ever stamp set. I've used this one before, but I'm using it again as I like to get lots of use out of my stamps. So I'm going to be using the cheese, the piece of cheese that's in here, and the cheese grater. I've got my standard A2 size card, and I'm going to be lining the images up. I want them overlapped, and I actually want to create a bit of a peekaboo card here. So I'll have those images inside that circle where I'm going to die cut, and you'll be able to see that, which will be stamped on the inside of the card, and you'll see that from the outside. So hoping that makes sense to you. I start out with the stitch circle die, and I've had these for a while, so I don't really remember where I got them from, as it was before I inventoried my stamps. I will link to some similar ones in my blog post. And I've just run that through my die cutting machine to cut out that circle window. I'm saving that insert because we will be using that for our second card. So now what I'm going to do is the images that I want, I've got them laid out here how I want them to appear. So we will be doing some masking as the cheese is going to appear like it's in front of the cheese grater. I pull out my Tim Holtz stamp platform here to get this done, and I'm going to lay that in the platform. And then what I'll do is making sure that those stamps are lined up perfectly in that window where you can see them. Then I'll lay down the platform lid to pick up both stamps, and I'm going to remove the cheese grater so that I just have the cheese on there. I'm using Memento black ink here so that I can use Copic colored markers. I stamp the cheese down, and now I'm going to use a sticky note as a mask. You can use labels. I'll link to some Avery labels that you can use as well, but I just used a sticky note that I had handy. I'm going to fussy cut that out with my Be Creative scissors here. I like these as they're light and fine detail. And just quickly cutting out around the image to create a mask. I'll lay that over top of that stamped image, and then I will bring that cheese grater back in and line that up so that it appears like it's behind that cheese. Laying my platform down, again inking it up with that Memento ink, stamping it over top. I'll remove that mask and I will actually save it. I'll put it on the carrier sheet of my stamps and use it for another project. Now I'm putting the cheese on a stamp block here, and I'm using some Umbrella Crafts Designer Gray Premium Dye ink. It's not my favorite ink, but it's what I had handy. I'd probably prefer to use Memento's gray ink, and again I'll link that preferred one in my blog post. And this is the front of the card now, so I'm just going to do some subtle stamping over top. I want the main focus of this card to be the image that we will see through that peekaboo circle. I'm laying a scrap sheet of this paper on the left hand side here so that I can have it look like the cheese is actually hanging off the edge and not stamp it on the back of the card. So I just use that to mask over the left hand edge of that card there, and just randomly stamping the cheese here and there, just to give the front of the card a bit more interest. I will not be coloring in any of these particular images. Like I said, I want the stamps that are peeking through that circle die cut there to be the main focus in this card. And then once I get that done, I'll go ahead and color up my images. I think that looks really cute. So like I said, I'm going to color up these images, and the Copic colors that I will be using. This is actually my Copic chart. My mom colored these in all for me, which was so nice. And I'm using Y15 and Y19. So I just go through and I kind of pick out the colors that I like. C3 and C4 will be actually for the cheese grater. And I start my coloring with the lightest. I move to the darkest color, and then back again to the lightest. Now it's not overly concerning with small images like this. You can start darker, but I wasn't sure where I wanted the darker spots to be other than just some of those holes that appear in that Swiss cheese. So I do start with my lightest color, filling that in, getting an idea of where I want the shadows to be, and I'll put those in with that darker Y marker. And I don't know if you saw that there, but my lid actually moved across my glass mat there. So what had happened, and it left some alcohol and some ink. So I don't know what's going on here. I store the markers flat. They're in a Copic case, so they actually lay horizontal to the ground. And I'm not sure what happened, but the alcohol ink actually collected in the lid, and then when I took the lid off, it pooled. So you want to be really careful with your Copic markers that they're not overly juicy and transferring onto your project. And this actually happened twice. It happened with the next card as well. So just something to be aware of with your Copic markers. I don't know if it's because I've now moved in my basement and it's a little bit cooler down there, that the alcohol inks are, something's happening with them, but just be aware of that with these Copic markers, that when you take the lids off, they can be really juicy and they can kind of leak. So keep that in mind. Now I've moved on to coloring this cheese grater. Again, I'm starting with that lightest color, filling in the image, getting an idea of where I want my shading to be with that darker color. And of course, I think I want it to be more on the inside top of that cheese grater, the handle, where the cheese butts up against the grater itself, and then kind of on the bottom. So I'll fill in that inside part on the top, and then I come in where the cheese is against the grater, and then that bottom portion of the cheese grater there I wanted darker as well. Going back in and just pulling a bit of that color out with the lighter C marker. And again, it's just some really quick coloring. And then I'm going to add some highlights with my white gel pen. Just kind of where, there's no really any rhyme or reason to it, just where I think that some highlights would be on the images. And then that finishes our card except for our sentiments. So I'm going to go ahead and use our punny greetings. And I want this to say, "You're the greatest," and great being spelt like the cheese grater. So I pull out my platform here. And if you've watched any of my other videos, you'll know that I struggle with getting the sentiments lined up nicely, especially when you have those small exclamation points. Dealing with those is a bit of a hassle, and everything sticks to my fingers or my ruler. I'll bring in my T ruler here to try and get it straight. But I just really struggle with these sentiments. So if you have any tips or tricks, let me know. So I did put a little bit of a pencil line on that circle so that I knew where the circle was. I wanted everything, all like the sentiment, to appear below that. I didn't want that peeking through. So I'm bringing in my T ruler and trying to line this up, and I'll try and speed this up because it is a painful process to watch. Everything sticks either, like I said, to my fingers or that silly ruler. And then what I'll do is I'll actually get both of the sentiments here. It says "You're the," and then "greatest" underneath. And I'll stick those down, and I'm actually going to remove my lid to attach the exclamation point. Because it's so small, it's easier just to attach it this way. That's one thing I like about this stamp platform, is you can remove the lid to do that. I'm using my Versamark Black Onyx ink here. This is, again, my preferred fine detail black ink. It seems to do an amazing job on every sentiment that I've ever stamped, or if I want a really detailed black image, that's my go-to ink to use. And then once I get that stamped down, that's our card. That's our first card done. A simple card, but I really like the way it turned out. And this one is going to a very special friend who really did me a solid favor and said some really nice things about me, and I just think that was really great of her. Pun intended. And now we're going to move on to our second card. So that's that die cut circle that we had cut out of our first card, and I'm doing the same thing in terms of layering the images and masking here, and I'm using those cute little popsicle images. And I'm having the smaller one appear in front. So stamping that down again with Memento ink because I want to Copic color. Just using that sticky note that I had tested my gel pen on. Fussy cutting it out with those Cutter Bee scissors. And I kind of thought that in my mind I had imagined these as like a daddy and a child popsicle characters. So I will be using those fun little faces that come with the stamp set and giving them a little bit of character. Again, I'll save that little sticky note mask and put it on the back of my carrier sheets there, and then if I need masks for next time, I have them all handy and ready and cut out. Going ahead and Copic coloring, again I bring out my chart here to figure out what colors I want to use. I'll be using 2 colors of the, RV4, RV09, YR02 and YR07, and I actually pull out another YR color because my one, I think it was the YR07, was actually dry, so I had to pull out a different color. I didn't have a refill for it. So quickly coloring that first, and you saw there that marker did the same thing. The lid kind of shifted across there, and I had a bit of an alcohol blotch there that I needed to wipe up so it didn't transfer to my image. But I colored that small popsicle image to be, in my mind, like a little girl popsicle, and then I'm doing a dad popsicle in the background, and I imagined him as being orange. So that first color I used there, that was the dry one. I'm going in and putting in the darker areas here in the shadows, and then I pull out another marker, and that's the YR04, just to fill that in because my first marker was so dry. You want to be careful with Copic markers. If they are dry, try not to color with them because it will damage your nib. You'd have to replace your nib. Then I also used my clear Wink of Stella just to give these little popsicles kind of a shimmer, because when you look at popsicles that have been pulled out of the freezer, to me they're shiny and shimmery, and I think every card needs a little bit of sparkle, so I added that. And I added this first before stamping the, I can't even think here, sorry, I'm coloring in the sticks as well, I forgot to mention that. The reason why I put the Wink of Stella down is when you put Wink of Stella on, you want to be careful because it will actually move those alcohol inks a little bit, and I wanted the faces of these little popsicles to stamp clearly, and I was afraid that if I had put the Wink of Stella on over top, it might mute their little faces a little bit. I wanted their facial features to be really crisp, so I stamped that on top of the Wink of Stella. So doing that here, and I did that with my Versamark. And then that finishes that little portion of the card. I'm now using the Cuttlebug Cross My Heart embossing folder. Some pink cardstock here, standard A2 size panel, and I am spraying that with some water. And I do that because when I run this through my embossing folder, sometimes your embossing folder can actually cut into the paper, and I didn't want that. I just wanted to emboss it. So that water loosens the fibers of the paper enough so that it embosses nicely but doesn't actually cut through your paper. I attach this now to a side folding standard A2 card, and I'll do that with the score tape here. The reason why I'm using score tape is one of the strongest adhesives. It never seems to fail me when I have embellishments or anything on my cards. And because this is an embossed panel, it's actually raised on the top of the card, and then there's indentations on the back of the card. So this will actually give me a nice solid adhesive, a good adhesive to the back of the card, and I know it's not going to lift off. So then once I get that burnished down, I remove the release tape, and I'm doing my little trick here where I don't remove all of the release tape. And the reason why I do this is I have troubles with my fingers and hands working properly, and if I removed all of that, I'd have this panel stuck to my hand, I'd have it stuck to my work surface, or stuck where I don't want it. This way I only have a little bit of that adhesive showing, and I can lay it down, and then once I get it in the perfect position, I can pull those folded edges out, and you'll see here that I just grab a hold of them and slowly pull them out, and then the card lays down flat nicely, and I'm not worried about sticking this panel everywhere. So a nice quick little trick here for you if you're having troubles lining up your card panels to your bases. Once I get that down, I am going to use some 3M foam tape, and I think I just get that from Amazon. And I'm going to use it to pop up that circle image. Just quickly cutting it with my Tim Holtz scissors. So I have special scissors for special tasks. I like my cutter bees to do the fine detail cutting, and I don't typically like to cut with my cutter bee adhesive because then it makes those scissors sticky and I don't get a fine cut. I like to use my Tim Holtz tonic scissors here for adhesive. I'll line that up a little closer to the top of the card, but still centered. And then I'm going to use this Banner-tastic die set. There's also stamps that go with it that you can get with it, but this is again another Lawn Fawn product. I'm using a darker type of cardstock here that is pink, and that matches that little, in my mind, the little girl popsicle image. It coordinates nicely. And then I'm lining up my sentiments inside that die cut, that banner there, because I will be stamping this on top. So I want to make sure that they fit and that I have everything lined up. I do eventually get it lined up, as you see, and I'm using my lid there on my little stamp platform, picking up those sentiments. Using my anti-static powder tool, because I'll be using the Versamark watermark ink there, I'll be heat embossing with white embossing powder. Go ahead and get that stamped up. And now I'll add, this is my White Ranger Detail embossing powder. It's one of my favorites. If you're doing fine sentiments, you want to go more with a detailed embossing powder rather than a chunky. I heated that up with my heat tool, got it all set, and then I will bring my banner back in to line that up. And I'm using that purple thermo web tape, and just little bits of it there to hold the die in place when I run it through my embossing machine. I'll remove the thermo web tape there, remove the banner, and I can now attach that to my card. And again, I'll be using some of that 3M tape, and I'll be popping that sentiment up. It gives your card a little more interest when you have things on different layers. And it says, "You are the coolest." And then that really finishes this card. I did go and on the inside of the card with that umbrella ink gray, what is it, that designer gray ink there. I will be stamping both these images again just on the inside bottom right, just to kind of carry the theme over to the inside of the card. So again, I'll be using that mask that I created and that I saved, put that over top, and layer those images. And I do not add the little faces this time on the inside though. And then that finishes our cards. They're all done. You're the coolest. I think that's so much fun, and that little bit of sparkle, and you're the greatest. Those are my punny cards for today. I did have an envelope here that matched the first card, so I decided to use again that gray ink and just kind of personalize the envelope a little bit by adding the cheese to the flap. And then I will go ahead and use the cheese grater on the front part of the card, the front right hand portion of the card there, just to make it a little more coordinated. It's little things like this that make your cards and envelopes a little more special and a little more personalized, I think. I'll stamp that down. And there we go, that finishes this off. You've got a coordinating envelope for your first card there. And that's a closer look of the card that we did, and with the envelope. I think that looks super cute, and I hope the person that I'm sending this to likes it, because they really are the greatest. And then I have this You're the Coolest card. I think it's really fun. Thanks so much for stopping by, and again, like I said, this is part of a blog hop, so go ahead and check the rest of the blogs out. You might want to check out these other videos. Please remember to hit like if you like this video, share with your friends, and if you want to see more, you can go ahead and hit that subscribe button. Thanks so much for joining me today, guys, and happy crafting!